Okay, so we're going to continue in our data unit, and today we're going to look at two other measurements that are very similar, but there are slight differences that we'll go through. So these are two types of deviations. So this one stands for mean absolute deviation, and then this is standard deviation. So we are talking about measures of variability. So how much does the data vary? So looking at the first one, we're going to start with the MAD, and I'm going to try and do them both at the same time. So, but first up, the MAD stands for mean absolute deviation. Okay, so we're going to pick this apart. So hopefully you know that deviation is like how something changes or how something is different. The mean is we're talking about the average, and absolute, we're talking about absolute value for that. So basically what we're looking for is how far away does our information from the mean. So how far does our test score deviate from the average? Okay, so standard deviation is another measurement, but this one is the standard deviation, and this one goes along with the normal curve, which we're actually not going to be looking at. But if you ever have heard somebody talk about like a bell-shaped curve, that's what we're talking about. A normal distribution is kind of just to give you an idea, but we're not going into that. We are just looking at how to find these two different measurements. So they're pretty similar, and you're going to see that when we actually go through the steps of to determine what the answer is. But I do want to point out that this one is the standard one. This one is good. This is what we use if we're doing like just general population type data. This one is more effective if we have outliers. So we're not going to worry too much about them. We're going to be working with both of them, and really all you need to do is be able to find them and interpret them and understand what it's saying. Okay, so when we talk about how something deviates, we're talking about how it differs, all right? So if we have our average right here, which is our mean, which I'm going to use X with the bar over it. That's a symbol for average. That's one of them. So what we're looking at for deviation is how far do our scores differ or deviate from the mean, okay? So if we have a score way out here, I'm going to call it X1, this score deviates a lot more from the average than, say, this score does. So what we're looking at is this measurement going across. So like right in here, this one has a large variance, while this one, so we're going to say variance is large. So this one varies a lot from the average, where this one varies a small amount. So this one right here, the variance is small. So that's what we are looking at. So basically, oops, that's supposed to say is small. So basically what we're saying is if our deviation numbers are small, that tells us that the scores were close to the average. And if that deviation number is large, that's going to tell us that the scores were far from the average. So if we were talking about a test in math, we would want our deviation numbers to be small, because that means that all of the scores are close together. So a small deviation, a small variance, tells you that the numbers are close to the average. All right, so let's go through on how to find them. So I don't want to scare you, but it is very cool when you look at what the formulas are for these two. So let's start with let's do the MAD first. Okay, so the formula for MAD looks like this. So this is a sigma, which is the sum, and then we have our absolute value bars, and we're going to take each number and subtract it from the average, and then we're going to take the average of that. So that's what the formula looks like for the MAD. All right, so here we go. Here are the steps. Step one is we need to find the average. Okay, so first thing you have to do is average your numbers together. All right, next thing that we're going to do is we're going to subtract each data point from the average. So we are going to subtract each data point, and I'm going to say with the average. And the reason why I'm going to say with is that we want the positive values only. So it doesn't matter if your score was above the average or below the average. We're just looking for how far are you from the average. And so that's where our absolute value comes in. So what that means is that we want positive values only. All right, so we're looking for the distance. All right, so positive values only. So then what we're going to do is we're going to average those values. And then you're done. So what we're going to do is find the average. We're going to subtract each number from the average. And then we're only going to use the positive values. So it doesn't matter if your score is above or below the average. It's just how far are you from the average. And then we're going to add those all up and divide by how many numbers there are. And that gives us the MAD. All right, so now we're going to look at standard deviation. Now the standard deviation one is a little bit scarier looking. But for the standard deviation, first off, we use the lowercase sigma is the symbol, and I didn't do a very good one, but it almost looks like a circle with a little loop. All right, so what we're going to do is very similar. Okay, we are going to find the average again, and then we're going to subtract each number from the average. So it's very similar to this. But instead of taking the absolute value, we're going to square it. Okay, then we're going to add all those up and take the average of those. So kind of similar. So the difference here is instead of taking the absolute value of it, we're going to square those numbers. But for standard deviation, once we get that number, we're going to take the square root of it. All right, so these are those steps. So first thing we're going to do is find the average. So same thing. Then we're going to subtract each data point. So subtract each data point with the average. And again, since our next step is to square that rather than take the absolute value of it, we're going to square those values. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. So in the end, we're only dealing with positive numbers. Same thing as over here. So square the values. All right. Then we're going to average those values. Oops, I meant to say those values. But this one is then we're going to take the square root of that answer. All righty. Okay, so let's do an example. Okay, so, gosh, I don't know. I don't know if we need a story or not, but, okay, let's just say, let's just say these are test scores. Okay, So we have a 72, a 91, an 88, and I'm just making these up. How about a 94, a 90, and let's do a 99. Why not? Okay, so these are our test scores, and we're going to find the MAD and the standard deviation of both. Okay, so hopefully you remember, first thing that we have to do on both of them is find the average. So what that means is we need to add these up and then divide by the number of numbers that we have. All right, so if you want to grab your calculator. All right, so first up is we need to add these together. So I am just going to, oops. All right, so we're adding 72 and 91 and 88 and 94 and 90 and 99. So we're going to add all those together, and I got 534. So right now we're working on the average here. So I got 534. We have 6 numbers, so divide by 6, and I got that the average is 89. Wow, that was actually amazing that I didn't get a decimal. All right, so that's our average. Okay, so next up, what we need to do is, for both of them, again, is to subtract each data point with 89. Okay, so what that means is that I am going to go through and say, just thinking to myself, how far is 72 from 89? And the answer would be 17. How far is 91 from 89? And that would be 2. How far is 88 from 89? That's 1. How far is 94 from 89? That's 5. How far is 90 from 89? That's 1. And how far is 99 from 89? And that's 10. Okay, so I've gone through and I found the subtracted each data point with the value. With our average. Okay, so now I'm going to switch over and just do the MAD. So for the MAD, we have the positive values only. So what we need to do is just average these numbers together. All right, so to average these, we need to add them all up. So let's see, that's 2736, it looks like. 36 divided by 6. So we get that the MAD is 6. So our mean absolute deviation is 6. Okay, so what that means is, on average, the class scored 6 points from the average. Okay, so that sounds pretty good, because 6 points above and 6 points below would make most people in the class happy. So that looks good to me. All right, now let's move over and take care of the standard deviation. Okay, so the standard deviation, after we subtract each of those values, we need to square them. So for these, I now need to square them. So 17 squared is 289. 2 squared is 4. 1 squared is 1. 5 squared is 25. 1 squared is 1. And 10 squared is 100. So now I have my squared values. So now I need to average these. So for the standard deviation, all right, so I'm going to use a calculator for this math just to be a little bit of a wimp. Okay, so actually it's not really that bad at all, because we have 289 and 100, so that's easy. And then we want to add 31 to that, if I did that correctly. So I got 420 over 6, which is super easy. This is crazy because that's 70. All right, this is amazing, this example that I made. All right, so now to get the standard deviation, we want to take the square root of 70. So if we take the square root of 70, oops, sorry, hold on a second. Square root of 70, we get 8.36. So we'll say 8.4. So our standard deviation is 8.4. All right, so I would consider both of these to be small. Whoops, sorry, I am off the camera. I would consider both of these to be small because, again, if this was the average, then one standard deviation above puts us in the A range and one standard deviation below still keeps us in the B range. So I would be happy with both of these scores to measure the variability of a test if these were 6 of the scores on the test. So again, what this shows us is how far do our scores vary from the average. All right, so hopefully if you need to go back, remember always go back and rewatch the video if I did something where I lost you. But again, the steps are the same. Find the average, subtract each data point. They're going to be positive in the end regardless, so we don't even care about whether it's above or below. For MAD, you're just going to take those values and average them. For standard deviation, you're going to square the values first, then average them, and then take the square root of your answer. All right, good luck.